Hey, greetings again, everyone. It's a busy day, and this is a big highlight of my day, my week, my month. We've got Max Kane, founder and CEO of FarmMatch.com. Welcome, Max Kane.
Thanks for having me, Naomi.
It's such a pleasure. And for those of you who are not familiar with this incredible person's work, his goal is to create a better food system that gives us and our planet a chance at a future. He is the founder and CEO of FarmMatch, as I mentioned, with over 1 million orders of farm food delivered, pushed 70 million in revenue to small farms. Wow. Host of the Foodcast, local food activist, natural health advocate, passionate author, engaging speaker, lover of the environment, visionary, dedicated solution maker, committed change maker, and also known for being the first person in U.S. history to voluntarily remove himself from permanent federal disability for degenerative Crohn's disease. That is quite an amazing bio.
I forgot I accomplished all that. Thanks for the reminder.
Of course. Well, I wanted to interview you because I met you at your event this past weekend. Was it so recent? At the wonderful dairy and event space Churchtown Dairy in Columbia County, New York. Tell us a little bit about that event.
Well, there's a little bit of history behind it. It was a roundtable event, and there's some history around it. So Churchtown Dairy was created by Abby Rockefeller. Abby and I have been friends for about 15 years. We met at a raw milk rally on the Boston Commons, I think probably back in 2012 or somewhere around that time. And we just kind of hit it off as friends. We had a lot of ideologies about the world, and both of us were huge advocates of raw milk. And I was actually interviewing her. This was probably at the beginning of COVID, and we were sitting in her barn, the barn where you were at for the event over the weekend, and we were just sitting around the hay in the round barn after the interview, and some people came over for dinner, and we're just having a great conversation. It's one of these conversations that you find yourself in kind of after the event, if there's some kind of after gathering. And I found that in those conversations, Naomi, is where a lot of like the rich meat, important topics get discussed. And so Abby and I kind of brainstormed together about, why don't we have some kind of a round table event here, at her dairy there in the barn, in the round table for the round barn is kind of what we were talking about. And that's where the whole idea came from. And that was the second event. The first one we had there was a couple years ago, but that's what kind of spawned the idea for it. Is because
what was the name of the weekend?
Then the actual name of the weekend, I called it Foodcast on Location: Farm Food Freedom at Churchtown Dairy.
Wonderful. And so there were luminaries from this whole world with which I'd really been not very familiar, except abstractly. There were raw milk activists. There were famous farm bill lobbyists out of Utah. Well, of course, Del Bigtree and Mary Holland spoke. We all know who they are, of course. But there were people just and yourself, deeply involved in getting healthful, whole food from farmers to people who want to eat that food. And I have to say, as a takeaway, I knew abstractly that there were difficulties in the path of that simple thing, but I had no idea that farmers are being treated like criminals for, very basic things like slaughtering their own animals on their own property to sell, or transporting raw milk across state lines. It's crazy. Can you say anything about the difficulties that farmers face in just trying to feed people directly without going through scary and expensive middlemen like big ag and the USDA and supermarkets?
I absolutely can speak to the difficulties. I've been living them for about 20 years. So for your listeners that don't know, it's in every state of the union in the United States, it is illegal for a farmer to slaughter and process a beef on their own property and sell it to their neighbors or their community or their family or anyone. You're not, right now, on-farm slaughtering and processing is illegal in every state. And what it forces the farmer into, it forces them into this system where they have to truck the animal to a certified processing facility, either a state facility or USDA facility. Oftentimes that facility might be a multiple hour one-way drive just to get to the animal there and back. So what it makes it really hard, especially during COVID. A lot of these facilities got shut down, and so it put a huge hindrance on the supply chain for people couldn't get food. And actually, interestingly enough, the state of Maine, and I think Maine is the only state that did this, but they recognized that the people were literally starving and had nowhere to get food. So they actually put the law on pause for a second.
Mm.
A law that says you have to get the animal processed in a state facility or a federal facility.
Mm-hmm.
And they allowed they're like these smaller, let's call them custom slaughterhouse. This is if you're a farmer and you want to bring an animal in to get processed just for your own consumption. So you're not going to be reselling the meat. So they have these custom slaughterhouses. So the state of Maine during COVID, at least during the beginning of it, they allowed some of the custom slaughterhouses to act as state processors or federal processors to keep the people of Maine fed.
Mm.
Unfortunately, other states in the union did not go that extra mile, but Maine did.
Mm-hmm.
But they're right now going all around the country, Naomi. There are farmers who are stepping up in peaceful non-compliance
Mm.
and slaughtering animals on their farm and selling the meat. And
Wow, what's happening to them?
well, some of them are getting raided. Some of them are not. Samuel Fisher in Farmville, Virginia, he got raided for that about a year back.
My
And
God.
he kind of stood his ground and they took him to court, but he just let them know that he wanted to keep going. And keep in mind, he has hundreds and hundreds of families and customers. I mean, these are all good contributing people to society, you know, doctors, attorneys, bus drivers, parents, just all
Mhm.
kinds of people that buy food from Samuel. Samuel also sells raw milk and other raw dairy products that he raises on his farm, but he also processes meat on the farm as well.
Wow.
Kristen Canty, who was at the event over the weekend, she made a film some years back called Farmageddon that
Mhm.
really highlights a lot of these farms getting raided for trying to create, I guess we could call them local food communities.
Right.
Because, yeah,
Mhm. Max, isn't that how farmers farmed and fed their communities for centuries of American history before some mid 20th century regulation? I mean,
yeah,
aren't they just going back to what they did in Little House on the Prairie?
yeah, absolutely, Naomi. And not only, what the thing about this is, not only is that's how farmers have done it for centuries and how society has done it for centuries. Besides that, it's actually how it's being done right now today. What I mean by that is because I don't want to contradict what I just said, but it's totally legal for a farmer to process an animal on the farm as long as they don't sell the meat and
Uh-huh.
as long as they just eat it themselves or for their family on the farm.
Mhm.
So, right now, today, thousands of farmers are processing meat on the farm for their own consumption, and none of them are getting sick.
Wow.
And it's better for the animal because the animal doesn't have to ride, how many hours to a facility where it's going to get killed. The farmer can just kind of slaughter it more in a comfortable way on the field. It's better for the environment because we don't have to burn all this extra fuel to transport this animal.
Mhm.
And it's better for the food eater because it reduces the cost of the food and it allows the food eater. And as everyone probably knows, this healthy farm food, if you're farming organically and you're putting more labor into the food, more manual labor, and you're not using chemicals, sometimes the food can be a little bit more pricey. So
Mhm.
that, and And a lot of people who I've spoke with said they would prefer to eat healthier, but the healthier food's a little more
So
pricey.
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, so on-farm processing is another way to keep good quality, high quality, super quality local farm food at a lower price for the food
Wow.
eater.
It seems like win, win, win.
It's win all the way around. Everyone wins, except there is a lose in there. Big food would big food would lose a little bit.
Because the supermarkets don't get a cut, the slaughterhouses don't get a cut, the distributors don't get a cut. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's part of it. Not only would they not get a cut, is they would lose their monopoly in their price control.
Oh, they would be competing with a bunch of small farmers who can undercut them.
Yeah, and there's monopoly in the beef industry, but there's monopoly in the big dairy industry. The dairy industry is where the monopoly really shows itself. So, for example, in many states, farmers are not allowed to sell raw milk. In some states you can, but in many states you can't. And so when the farmer produces this milk, it forces the farmer, because they can't sell it raw, they can't bottle it up and sell it to the neighbors even though they're drinking it themselves and
Mhm.
they're completely fine. Somehow, when you sell it, Naomi, it becomes this toxic biohazard that's extremely dangerous that we need tons of regulations for. So, what happens is since they can't sell it, they're forced to sell it to one of these big certified creameries that is going to pasteurize it, homogenize it. Who knows what kind of additives are put into it? Because in the US food system, not only have we lost origin of labeling, but we've lost ingredients. So some of the ingredients are allowed to be put in the food and not even be put on the label.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
It's really crazy. And
Yeah.
then some of the ingredients, you don't even know what it is. It says natural flavors, or some just say flavors. And you think,
Right.
what is this, right?
That.
So really, we're not informed as food eaters. But getting back to how this monopoly in the dairy industry works, what happens is, so the farmer's forced to sell that milk to the creamery who's going to process it and then ultimately either make cheese or bottle it into liquid milk or whatever they're going to do with it. But
Mhm.
what happens is when the farmer sends the milk to the creamery, the farmer doesn't get to say, "Oh, by the way, creamery, this is how much I would like for my milk that I'm
Oh,
selling." The
wow. Wow.
creamery dictates the price to the farmer on how much the farmer's going to get, and the farmer's kind of backed up in this corner where there's nothing else they can really do because it's literally illegal for them to sell the milk to their community.
That's such a mafia tactic. And it's also really Marxist. I mean, I guess it's both Marxist mafia, centrally planned economy. Like in no other sector are you allowed to say, I'm going to dictate to you what the market will bear. It's not capitalism.
Yeah, it's really disgusting. And there's actually been reports and news articles that some of these dairy families who have been dairying for generations, some of the farmers, very unfortunately and sadly, have ended up committing suicide because they couldn't pay the bills. They couldn't keep the farm.
God.
Dairy farming was all they knew. Maybe they were like the fifth generation dairy farm. And sometimes when these creameries just kind of really squeeze that price down low. It's unfortunately some of these farmers, these dairy farmers, have chosen to end their life very sadly. It's totally disgusting,
That
Naomi.
is absolutely disgusting. And I understand that we're losing tens of thousands of family farms, right?
Yeah, well, where I live in Wisconsin, I think at one time in the height of, I mean, Wisconsin on the license plate, it says America's Dairyland.
Mhm.
And this isn't a quote, but these numbers are going to be pretty close. And anyone who wants to, they could look it up online. But I think in the height of Wisconsin, we had probably, I think, over 180,000 small dairy farms in Wisconsin. And now I think we're down to 7,000. So that's 180 down to seven. And the farms are a lot bigger than before. So we're losing the small farms, and they're being consolidated by these big farms that unfortunately are producing a much inferior product that a lot of people are getting allergic to now. I mean, like
Right,
allergy to dairy. I don't know if you could call it dairy, but
right,
this white liquid that they're calling milk that is passed off as milk. A lot of people like allergies really, really gone up to it.
right. And that's because they're treating the cows worse than the small family farmers treated the cows?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, for a long time they were injecting cows with bovine growth hormone to help the cows produce more milk, because it's all about making more money, even though you're giving a worse product to the food eater. But they eventually outlawed that. But the only reason that got outlawed is because activists, perhaps like yourself or myself or someone else, made a big stink about it. You would
Mhm.
think that some of the big players in the food system would have the integrity on their own just automatically to say, hey, you know what? We don't want to be doing this to the cows, or we don't want this to be going into the food. And a lot of the stuff was common sense, but unfortunately, it takes an uprising to keep the food healthy. We shouldn't have to do that, because we should be able to know our food source from our local community.
Mhm.
But the way the country is right now, we're kind of backed into this system where feeding ourselves and our community. And here's the right. This is what I would call it. And if anyone studies the Constitution, this is what you want to call it. You want to call it peacefully assembling for the purpose of feeding ourselves. Right now, and that should be covered under the Ninth Amendment and the First
Right.
Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. But right now, I guess it's illegal to peacefully assemble for the purpose of feeding ourselves. And so it forces us into this food system that's centralized and monopolized, and food's coming from far away. And we basically have very little knowledge of what we're putting in our bodies.
That is so insane. I mean, I live in a very kind of rural agricultural area, and I literally don't know where to go to buy, potatoes or Brussels sprouts. But if I go to the supermarket in Hillsdale, I'm going to be buying fruit and vegetables from, Chile and Argentina and a million miles away. It's complete lunacy. Uh, and so until I sat through your event this past weekend, I really didn't realize how politically fraught milk was. In addition to what you just said, I didn't realize that people were, as you pointed out, breaking the law by transporting raw milk across state lines. So let's drill down into raw milk. I know that a lot of people, when they hear raw milk, they go, oh my God, as you said, like biohazard, right? Like, why would you? Pasteurization saved us. Talk about the health benefits of raw milk. Talk about your own journey with Crohn's disease, if you will. And
Sure.
then let's talk about the criminalization of raw milk.
Sure. So uh, I'll go into the order you asked. So first, the criminalization of raw milk. Basically, it was some decades back where they called them these swill dairies. And the swill dairies were feeding the cows just a terrible diet, and people started getting sick from the milk that was being consumed. I mean, it's really simple, like good in, good out, bad in, bad out. You're not going to be able to feed an animal, a dairy cow or a meat cow or anything, um, a bad diet and then expect be able to get milk or meat out of that animal and have it be healthy.
Mhm.
And so they came up with the solution of pasteurizing it, and homogenation is a little bit different from pasteurization, but the scare of the bacteria getting you sick was dealt with through pasteurization. And so because they felt they were doing the public, good, that's the story we're told, but it probably had a lot of business interest in it, because even the people who wanted to drink raw milk, and they weren't allowed to buy it. So there's definitely some business interest in there, but as the story's told, it was to protect society. And so that's how the whole thing happened. It's like there was these terrible farming practices that, so the cows are being fed old, grain waste from distilleries. And even some of the big, farmers nowadays. I was interviewing this farmer in Texas. This was back in well, I guess this was 15 years ago. This was back in 2000, December. It was December 2008 or January 2009. I don't know. It was right in there. And he was down in Midland, Texas, and he was feeding the cows And the 1,000 of cows, big CAFO dairy, it stands for Confined Animal Feeding Operation,
Oh,
for anyone that doesn't know that acronym. But it
mm.
was feeding the cows chicken manure, uh,
Oh,
jelly beans, and feather meal.
oh,
Yeah, and totally disgusting. And so even nowadays, there's almost anything goes. If the cow will eat it, and if it'll make them produce more milk, these big dairy farmers are probably going to feed it to the cows,
oh,
and then they deal with it by pasteurizing the milk. So pasteurization actually is a really bad thing because it allows a farmer to have these farming practices that are toxic to the animals and
mhm.
toxic to the food eater.
So the
If
pasteurization just covers up how bad the milk is.
exactly. It's almost really similar to how, just always taking medication instead of maybe changing a person's lifestyle kind of just covers it up.
Wow.
And if there was no such thing as medication, it would make us be accountable to live healthier lifestyles, because
Mhm.
otherwise we have to deal with the consequences of an unhealthy lifestyle, similar to how a big CAFO farmer would have to deal with the consequences of how they treat the animal if we didn't have pasteurization. So it
Right.
allows them to kind of continue that animal abuse, and cover it up with pasteurization. So, uh,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
so
disgusting.
so pasteurization got really popular because people felt they were safe. And after enough time, that we had this kind of industrialized food system after World War II, where canning food became more popular, and bigger factory for everything kind of scaled up on an industry level. And then at some point, organic came really back in fashion, and then the family farm and tilling the land with the sweat of your brow instead of just spraying pesticides. And
Mhm,
so with that came back the raw milk movement. People wanted these natural dairy products again.
mhm.
And so, but it was illegal. Well, here in America, I think part of our DNA is standing up against unjust laws. So a lot of people said, "Yeah, I know it's illegal, but what the heck?" Is especially when it comes to food. If a person likes a particular food, and I think to some degree we all have that in us. We're like, well, if it tastes good, I'd like to eat it to some degree.
Mhm.
But so this movement of raw milk really came back strong. I don't know what year it became popular. It was probably somewhere in the late 70s, maybe early 80s, where it started building. But then in the 90s and early 2000s, it started just getting a lot more traction. I mean, now I think the statistic that I've seen is that 4% of Americans drink raw milk on a regular basis.
Wow, that's really
uh, I
interesting.
know you just hear 4%, but actually 4% is a huge number.
And
And
mhm, go ahead.
so the criminality comes into play, is that most states it's illegal, or and then it's also illegal to go over state lines with it. Well, what happens when there's this big city like where I grew up, Chicago, for instance, and it's right by the state of Indiana or the state of Wisconsin, where there's these amazing dairy farms, right?
Mhm,
So a
mhm.
lot of times where you have this one state that kind of has the metropolis, and then right over the state line were these awesome farms, the dairy's getting shipped in. It's almost like the underground railroad, sort
Right.
of, if you can make that parallel, where a lot of the farmers who are participating in these quote unquote illegal activities aren't just doing it for the people who want the natural health benefits,
Mhm.
but for some people are really, really sick, like the way I was, and they need it for their health. They like need
Right.
it for their survival. So kind of taking that and merging into my health story. When I was 11 years old, I was diagnosed with the degenerative Crohn's disease. So Crohn's disease is a digestive illness. It can affect you anywhere from basically from your mouth all the way to your anus. So anywhere in the digestive tract. If it affects you, and there's all different levels of it. It could be degenerative. It cannot be degenerative. But if it affects you in the colon and the large intestines, you can take that remove. You can get that removed, and you walk around with this bag. They call it a colostomy bag on the side. But the small intestines is a vital organ similar to the heart or the liver. You can't live without it, right? And so I was really sick at a young age, had these terrible, excruciating abdominal pain. Like sometimes I would be clutched in the fetal position literally for 72 hours straight,
Oh
just
my
trying
God.
to, yeah, just trying to deal with the pain. It was really bad.
Mm.
I was put on some medications that helped a little bit, but I could never gain weight. I was degenerating. All the food I ate didn't process and assimilate into bodily tissue.
Oh my God.
And so I was, at the time, I probably was down to about 69 pounds on
Oh,
my skinniest. And if you want, I could email you some pictures.
oh God.
But I was just in really bad shape. And then in my early 20s, I had someone that was near and dear to me in my life. That was they were on heroin, and I watched them totally destroying their life with heroin.
Uh-huh.
And I was telling them, Naomi, I was telling them, because I love them, right? They're really close to me, and whenever someone is a drug addict and you see what's happening to them in their life, it like hurts you almost as much as hurting them, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so I'm telling them, you don't have to do this, please stop. You can do better things with your life. And then so anyway, I'm giving them all this advice. Don't we love to give advice to other people, right?
Yeah.
And so as I'm driving, one day as I'm driving through the drive-through of this Walgreens pharmacy, picking up my prescription, um, all the advice somehow, Naomi, I don't know how else to explain it other than this. All the advice kind of came back to me. It was like a sound bite. Like I could hear myself preaching to myself, like, Max, take responsibility for your life. Max, you don't have to. Max, yes, you can.
Wow.
And I started really thinking about my own behavior and my lifestyle and what I was doing. And the truth of the matter was I wasn't taking responsibility for my life. I wasn't saying what can I do. It was always just, oh, doctor, what can you do for me? Oh,
Right,
is this your best solution? Well, I won't look for another solution.
right.
And so I started reading books and attending conferences about self-care.
Mhm.
And whenever you look into self-care, I mean, really, you learn about nutrition and better sleeping habits and exercise and things like that. And I heard about raw milk, right? And so I couldn't get raw milk. It was illegal. At the time, I lived in Chicago, or in the suburbs outside of Chicago. So I ended up making the pilgrimage up to this dairy farm in Portage, Wisconsin, to buy some illegal raw goat milk, to make myself some homemade raw goat milk. Kefir is the proper pronunciation from
Okay.
Eastern
Okay.
Europe, and we call it kefir in
Mhm,
America, but kefir.
mhm.
And it helped me a lot, and I was able to eat that food and some other fresh farm foods, raw, by the way, without abdominal pain. So it was
Wow.
like a huge wake up call for me, Naomi, that I was able to actually have a meal without excruciating abdominal pain, which
Wow.
I couldn't even remember the last time I ate without abdominal pain. So I knew, like, I had found something really special that worked for me. And then I eventually stopped taking all the medication. I put on probably about 60 or maybe even 80 pounds of healthy
Wow.
athletic weight, not, I didn't get obese or anything, but like I could build muscle tissue and
Right.
regenerate my body tissue the way I
Mhm.
never could before. And then
Wow.
eventually I got to the point where I contacted the Social Security disability office. I was on permanent federal disability, and I asked them to remove me, which is kind of a funny story in itself, because they said, we can't remove you. You're on permanent disability. And I said, well, isn't there a form to fill out? That I can remove myself. They said, no, there's no such thing. They said, usually people are trying to get on disability, not
Right,
off disability. We've
right,
never heard of this before. And I said, well, I'm not going to cash the check anymore. Back then, I'm assuming now that, I mean, I don't get any government subsidies, but I'm assuming now they just kind of electronically send you money to a bank account or something. Back then, I was getting an actual paper check from the U.S. Treasury. I should have kept one. It would have been a cool, tangible souvenir for the story. But I think I was getting about $675 a month. And then every so often, they would increase it to compensate for inflation and whatnot.
mhm,
So the lady's name was Mrs. Hogan, And she got her supervisor, and we had talked on the phone. They said, well, you're going to have to send in a letter and kind of have it notarized and
Mhm.
sign it saying you want to get removed, and then we'll stop it. So we kind of did this kind of hodgepodge certified letter, because there's no actual form to get removed from disability, and then they eventually stopped sending the checks. And so,
Wow. So
yeah,
raw milk cured you.
raw
And
milk was definitely, I wouldn't say raw milk cured me, raw milk, but it was a big part of it. It was actually a huge lifestyle change, and raw milk and diet was a huge part of it. But it was just not drink raw milk and continue to eat all the other garbage.
right.
So I very committedly switched to a like 99% fresh farm food diet,
Wow.
comprised probably 50 to 80% of it's probably raw dairy products from local farms, which
Oh.
I bought and which I still buy to this day illegally.
Why is it illegal to buy raw milk products?
From the farm?
Yeah,
Because the big dairy companies don't want to lose their well, I mean,
I see.
the story we're told is because it's unsafe, but
Right.
that story doesn't make sense to me,
Yeah.
because I've been eating raw dairy products for over 20 years now, and I've
Mhm.
had nothing but better health from it,
Right.
and
Right.
I've never gotten sick from it. And the farms I get the milk from have to be violating every safety standard known to man. I prefer milk from animals that are milked by hand, the
Mhm.
way it used to be done a long time ago.
Mhm.
And so the way the dairy industry and the way state law, at least in Wisconsin, and probably every state has a similar law, that when you milk by hand, it's even more dangerous. So hand milked dairy can't even pass for grade A in
Wow.
Wisconsin. So you can't even make milk out of it. It's They consider it grade B milk, which means it can only be made into cheese or other products like that. But the reason I prefer hand milk is because when you milk by machine, Naomi, oftentimes you have these really long milk lines. And the only real way to clean those out is with some kind of chemical agent or a cleanser or something like that.
Ah,
So when you milk by hand, you can milk into an open stainless steel bucket,
right.
and you can sanitize it all with hot water. Hot
Right.
water is the best sanitizer ever.
Right.
We don't
Right.
need to be using these chemicals and whatnot. So it just kind of, from my perspective, it creates a more of a chemical-free product.
Right.
If you're not going to milk by hand, the next thing would be called a bucket milker, where you walk around from cow to cow with this bucket, and the milk lines are just like a few feet long, as opposed to these really, really long milk lines.
Right.
But if you're getting good, fresh, raw milk from grass-fed cows that are milking with the long milk lines, don't let me discourage you. That is a great product. But I'm really sensitive to foods I eat, and so that's kind of why I just go the extra mile for like the purest of the pure.
Right.
But ironically, the state says that that's the dangerous of the danger. But I've never gotten sick from it, and my family hasn't, and the other people that I know that buy the milk that way, milk by hand, they've never had a problem with it either. So
Right.
yeah.
So you're saying it's illegal probably because the state you live in, right? Because we're going to go to a couple of farms nearby to pick up some raw milk here in New York State, and I know that it's legal to buy raw milk in New York State. Is that the reason that it's illegal where you are?
Yeah. Every state has their own laws with regards to raw milk. So you can buy milk, if I understand the laws correctly in New York, you can buy it off the farm. But
Mhm.
if the farmer was to deliver it to you, that would be illegal. I'm pretty sure the
Unbelievable.
farmer cannot deliver it.
Unbelievable.
I
So
know.
Cynthia Klippel says we are too separated, those who want from those who want health. Maple Farm in my town has raw milk here in Massachusetts. Thank you for that. And I'm going to take that off now. And then Digibabe says, this is very interesting. We went to the Organic Horizon Milk Farm and the cows were treated horribly and the babies had serious anxiety. That is so sad.
It
And
is.
that's an organic farm. Um, and uh, and then she also says in North Carolina, I think cigarettes are allowed in stores, but not raw milk. Uh, So that's a paradox.
That's something.
Yeah. So in the last few minutes that we have together, I really want to bring the conversation to FarmMatch, because you're describing a situation in which big ag and big government has managed to disconnect human eaters, or I guess what you call food eaters, right, from farms and family farms and organic farms and local farms. And they can't find each other. I mean, people across the country have the same problem I'm having. Like, how do I, this all sounds great, but, I can't have a second job tracking down, the various items I need in various farms across the state. So you've created a really impressive, elegant solution called FarmMatch. Why don't you talk about that?
Thank you for that compliment. Well, FarmMatch is basically my artwork as an activist. So, Naomi, I saw this problem with the disconnection between the food eaters and the people wanting health and wanting healthy food, and they're having access to it. And so I built an online solution where, I don't want to use the word Amazon or something. It's like an online marketplace where you can go in and put in your zip code and find a farm, hopefully in your area. But if not in your area, there are farms that are willing to ship, where you can get fresh, healthy food direct from a farm. And it's just my way of trying to create a solution and not just being out there talking about the problem, which I like to do too, because and it's important we talk about problems, right? It's because we need to become aware of them and figure out how we're going to make change in the world. But then we also, if we're going to talk about a problem, one of my mantras in life is, like, if you don't do something about it, you really have no right to complain.
Right.
So
I agree.
So FarmMatch, right now I'm working with about 40 farms around the country that provide food direct to people. It's great to be connected with a farm. It will help you, especially during the next pandemic. At some point, there's going to be some other kind of pandemic or crisis or food shortage. And it's good to be connected direct with a farm, so you're going to have food during those times of crisis. Besides, just wanting to get food from a farm anyway, because it's the best way to eat. It's best for the environment. And, it's going to give you and your family longevity and your health.
Right.
But that's kind of a little bit of a summary of FarmMatch. I'm working on right now putting together a directory. My goal is to kind of scale it up where we can have more farm options in local areas. And I think I'm going to be able to get about 50,000 farms on the platform
Wow.
over the next 4 to 5 years, so that we can create more of a local food system. We need a local food system, Naomi, is vitally, vitally important for the future of the human species and our planet.
Absolutely.
A decentralized food system is the most resilient system we can have, that protects us against everything you can imagine, from World War III to terrorist attacks to global warming to pollution. I mean, whatever box you want to check,
Right.
a local food system solves, or probably solves, that problem to some degree, or at least addresses it if it doesn't completely solve it. And if nothing else, it binds us together with other people in our community, so we can have those local relationships and know our neighbors like we used to years ago.
Right. Wow. As you're speaking, I'm thinking all those people, especially on the left, who talk about green energy and climate change, they pretty much never say, hey, check out FarmMatch, because, or, make sure that you make friends with your local farmer. And that would go so far, as you say, to solve so many of these problems. I mean, I'm just thinking about the fossil fuels it takes to transport a cow, from a farm to a feedlot in the Midwest, and from there to a supermarket, and, so on and so on. But you can scale that by gazillions. So now I want to share my wonderful experience with FarmMatch. I was really so pleasantly surprised, partly because I know what it means to be a non-technologist building a digital platform. I'm assuming you're a non-technologist, right?
I am a non-technologist, very non.
You did a great job. It's super intuitive, and I was looking for raw milk and dairy products that could come to me in Brooklyn and come to a loved one of mine who has some issues that are health issues that raw milk may address. I was inspired by your story. So that's what I was looking for. And I got 2 recommendations from the milk activists and fresh food activists that we were hosting at our house. And I found it so easy. I just selected those farms and it pops up at a menu of all the different products. And they're honestly, some of them were competitive with supermarket prices or even better than supermarket prices. I was so pleasantly surprised. And then I did locate 2 farms that are going to ship fresh, raw dairy and other items to me in Brooklyn in a cooler. And then they're going to pick up the cooler. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I can't get over it. And it wasn't prohibitively expensive. And I'm getting the best possible food. I tasted raw milk again. I've tasted it from time to time. And then we ran out and I had some pasteurized milk. And it's not even the same substance, right? It just, raw milk tastes so much better. So I just want to endorse your platform because everyone should be using it. And I hope you grow and grow and grow and grow, and you become the Etsy of farms or, the Google of farms, because there's no reason we shouldn't use your platform to bypass supermarkets and big ag and the USDA. That's all. It's not really a question. It's just an endorsement. I was just so delighted with how easy it was, how pretty it was, how intuitive it was, and how well it works. And that's a lot of money you're delivering to local farms.
Yeah, well, first off, Naomi, thank you for your endorsement and those compliments. We have, for those who don't know, we have a 2.3, and this is a T, not for timeout, but T for trillion. We have a $2.3 trillion food economy. And that's just in the US. It's not even the whole globe. Just in the US, every year, $2.3 trillion gets spent on food. And so if we can take that cash flow that's flowing, right, and redirect it into the hands of these small local farms that are raising food the right way, wow, what a world we'll have.
Right.
And so that's the way I think about it. I want to kind of like divert that flow. And I have a personal goal. I've set a life goal. You have all these bucket lists. I have a personal life goal before I pass on. I want to have sent $1 billion to small farms. And
I love it.
I'm 7%. I'm 7% the way there.
I love it. And Max, isn't it the case that if small farms make more money, they can hang on to more of their land or even buy back some of their land and it won't all go to Bill Gates in China?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Naomi. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's just one of the many benefits we get when we direct money to the small farm. I have this weird fantasy of, the farmers are the ones driving these nicer vehicles and the doctors are the ones in the broke down pickup truck.
That's
when you think like, oh, that's a farmer, they're probably pretty well off, and
well, they used to be. They used to be in this country. Farmers were the middle class and even the upper middle class. It was a respected profession, and it was people could make a living. Mm-hmm.
I have a friend of mine, Alejandra Sanchez, who is from South America. Mm-hmm. And when she moved up to Chicago and I met her, she was telling me about this native tribe in South America. I think the country is Brazil. Mm-hmm. And they have these, the tribe has these, I think, 5 factions within the tribe. And they have the hunters of the tribe. They have the kind of spiritual leaders of the tribe. And then they kind of have the medicine man level of the tribe. Mm-hmm. And these are the top 3 factions that they were telling, that Alejandra was telling me about. And she actually asked me, because she's spent some time with them, she asked me if I wanted to travel with her to go visit them. And I said, mm-hmm. I absolutely love to do it. We haven't gotten around to it yet, but on the bucket list, right? But anyway, she said the most important faction in the tribe are the hunters.
Oh, wow.
Providers of the food in that tribe are above the spiritual leaders and above the medicine people. So
Right. Makes
it
sense.
was hunters, then it was spiritual leaders, and then it was medicine people. That was the order for that particular tribe. So the food creators, the hunters, the farmers, those who bring food forth to the population,
Mhm.
my personal belief is that those are if anyone's the heroes in society, those are the heroes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to add to that by saying it really makes sense, doesn't it? And it's so crazy how badly we treat them in this culture. Like, it's so weird. They're
Yeah.
providing something we can't live without, and they're just treated very punitively. Um, there's, so as I said at your event, a lot of these problems that farmers face have legislative solutions, especially at the state level. And there are actually some very good bills that are out there that I'm going to gift you and FarmMatch a subscription to BillCam, because you can find all agricultural bills state by state, and they're socially shareable, so people can get behind them and pass them. But where I'm going with this is, people can help farmers by getting behind good farm bills. Like Thomas Massey has a bill that I was very interested in that would allow farmers to slaughter animals on their own farms and not go through the USDA system. So where should people go for legislative solutions, in addition to BillCam, that would help the farmers in your network?
That's a great question. I was thinking about opening up a page. We don't have this yet. Our team was actually having a meeting about this just a few weeks ago, about opening up a page on the FarmMatch platform, and showing all the different food bills in the 50
Oh,
states.
we can do that for you. We now
Yeah,
have something called Legisector, and you can get just agriculture, and you can get top trending agricultural bills. We can white label it for you. We have that.
yeah. Well, let's definitely collaborate on that, Naomi, because but that would be a great way for people to get information, because a lot of these bills that we're talking about, um, the usually kind of the internal circles of the activists know about the bills, but we definitely need a way to bring those bills in, to the awareness of the greater population, because unfortunately mainstream media is not making it their priority to tell people about them.
Right. Well, awesome. Let's definitely do that. I mean, it's so exciting to think that there can be a dedicated agricultural bill section if you want it, and all of your viewers can, see those bills, be notified, and also mobilize people around them. So, in addition to legislatively, how and using FarmMatch, of course, for their own shopping needs, how do people help you, and where do they find you, Max? Sadly, our time is up.
Well, people, if they want, they can go to my website, maxkane.com, maxkane.com. You can click on my speaking schedule. I probably got another 10 places around the country that I'm speaking for the rest of this year. And if you see me at an event, definitely come up and say hello and shake hands. I love to meet people.
Wonderful. What an innovator you are, and what a light, you're shining on such an important part of our society and our life. It should be so central. And I'm going to ask my audience to do everything possible to support you. But above all, everyone, go to farmmatch.com and order up some delicious fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, meat, dairy, and even salves and medicinal items and wonderful things. So we can't thank you enough. You're a true pioneer. Max Kane and farmmatch.com. Anything else? Can people find you on social media, or is
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on X. I'm on YouTube. Those are my three channels. Um,
awesome?
X.com/Max Kane. At Max Kane is my handle on those three platforms.
Wonderful. And will people be able to see the video of the farm event on YouTube soon?
Absolutely. We're producing the video, probably be finished. I mean, we were shooting, I think, 7 camera angles, so
Oh, wow.
we need a little time for it. It's not one of those things that's gonna be done in 3 days, but
Right.
we should have it done in less than a couple weeks. And as soon as we get it done, if anyone, I'm gonna publish it on YouTube. So if anyone wants to subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn on notifications, they'll get a notification right when we upload it.
Absolutely. Everyone do that. And thank you again, Max Kane, for your time and for being such an incredible revolutionary and inspiration, and for taking care of all those animals and all that land by the things you've done.
You're
Thank
welcome, Naomi. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.